The ENN line. I would like to get that working. I have an idea that we could test to see if we develop a ridership. A lot of people vote for train services or LRTs in the hopes that other people will get on them and clear the road so they can drive back and forth to work. Right? So my buddy Don from West Coast Appliance came up with this great idea. There's service buses or service trucks that ride on the railroad, and they lock themselves in with their, the wheels at the back, so they're right on the train tracks, and they can whip along. So if we fit buses with 30 passenger buses onto that sort of same system, we could get a continuous loop going in the morning, bringing people in, and then they would declick themselves and drive back on the empty roads, right? Because the roads are only congested coming into town. And at the end of the day, they could switch around and do it the other way. Now this would develop for a small investment proof that there's a ridership that wants to come in for a 10-minute train ride and come into town and then go back home at the end of the day. After we establish that there is a large ridership materializing, then we can invest again in the ENN Railroad and to get it up to snuff to have trains passing each other, which would be the big problem barring it now. It would have to be there and back and there and back. Right? So forming a loop with vehicles would give us a good test to see if there's a ridership that develops, and then we could justify the investment, which I think should be in the ENN. The LRT seems to be designed to make Walmart the center of our city, and I'm against that. Okay? So that's what I think about the ENN. We should strive to preserve it for sure.
Thank you. The ENN is something that I fought long and hard for. One of my first things I did when I got elected to mayor was to bring all of the mayors from here to Duncan all together. 14 of us went in and talked to the province and said, this is something that we need to see and we need to explore it as a commuter rail. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be. One of the persons, Minister Murray Cole, as he said, there's only going to be one train running and it runs by Uptown. It doesn't run there. And that's the province coming in with their money. We also had the big challenge, obviously, around the bridge, where people are saying, spend the extra $12 million to put that rail on the bridge. At the same time, Graham Bruce is saying to us, we're going to shut the railroad down in 3 months. So do we do a fast ferry thing? Do we put a $12 million viewing platform on our bridge, knowing that it's going to be closed, knowing that it needs a $15 million investment just to keep it running at 25 kilometers an hour, that needs a $150 million investment to make it run up and down? I believe it's a dayliner is really, really important. I believe that it's important that we preserve the corridor so as we move forward in the future. But I will also say this. I recognize that the ENN, as a commuter rail, and commuter only runs during the morning and only runs during the night. It's not rapid. It's not every 6 minutes. As a commuter rail, the estimates is that it will move 5,000 people a day. That's the top end of estimates. Light rail on the Douglas Street corridor, the estimates are 30 to 45,000 people a day. That's moving a lot of people. And I want to say that when you take a look at light rail, it's really important. I mean, when people came forward and said, well, we'll just do the light rail from Langford to Uptown and we'll stop there until Victoria is ready to go. Do I really want to create Uptown as the middle of our region? We need to make sure and we need to understand that congestion is huge in our downtown. And to make sure that our downtown, which creates 45% of all the employment in this whole region, remains active, vital, and make sure that we can keep moving in and deal with those issues of congestion. We have to do it. We have to do it in an affordable way. We can only do it if we have the federal government and the provincial government in, but it is something that we're going to have to do for our future. Thank you.
Well, as I said at the beginning, I'm not a politician, and I want to be a politician, but because I'm not a politician, I'm more inclined to tell you what you need to hear. Yeah, I'd like to have the ENN back, but I don't think it's realistic at this time. I'd like to have an LRT, but I don't think it's realistic at this time. We do need to deal with the transportation issue. There's no doubt about that, coming in from the Western Shore. Whose problem is that? Well, it's a regional issue, but it's a problem that's affecting people from Saanich and the Western communities. And I think we should be at the table and coming up with a regional transportation strategy to deal with it. I don't know whether LRT is the right solution, to be quite honest with you. I'm willing to listen. But what I also want to say to the Western communities in Saanich is, we're prepared to come to the table and deal with your regional issue, transportation. It doesn't affect us in Victoria. But if we're coming to the table to deal with your regional issue in terms of transportation, we do expect you to come to the table and speak to our regional issue, and that be regional policing and the fact that we've been carrying the ball in terms of regional homelessness in the Victoria Centre. It's unfair to expect us to deal with their issues if they're not willing to deal with ours. I would just add this last minute. Many of you probably know, but I'll say, who built the Lionsgate Bridge? The Guinness family. The Guinness family built it because they wanted to increase the value of their properties on the British properties. If we build the LRT, the major benefactors are not going to be those of us in Victoria. And I think we should be focusing on the priorities that we have in the city of Victoria. We need to replace the Crystal Pool. We need to deal with the infrastructure. Fernwood is probably the worst example of how infrastructure has been let go. Your curbs, your roads, your sidewalks, they need addressing. That's the priority. Thank you.
What we've done is we've not included rail on the new Johnson Street Bridge. We preserved the rail corridor. If at time in the future that they do find the $100 million that commuter rail gets to run, then we have that corridor preserved and we can add on a rail line and bring it into our downtown. But at this time, knowing that there is the future of the ENN is very, very shaky, there is no investment from senior level government, that we felt that spending $12 million to put a rail line on there, knowing that it probably wasn't going to run, would not be a wise investment at this time. It's something you believe in, but it was eighth. Cost was a big issue. Many, heritage, bike lanes, all those other transportation issues we put on, big one. But we heard that was the one that, although there was support for, there wasn't the strongest support for, and we recognize that. Let's preserve it, make sure it can run in the future. But again, it's going to have to be a regional investment, not just us. So thank you. I don't know how the rest want to respond to that.
I don't have much to add. I mean, I certainly would favor the ENN over an LRT down Douglas Street. But at this stage, I haven't seen a sound business case. I'd like to see the ENN continue to run. I don't see it as being a major factor in terms of alleviating the congestion coming in from the Western Shore. It certainly would help, and I think there are some innovative solutions that can be brought to the table. But certainly the money has got to come from other parties. Victoria cannot fund this one alone. It just can't.
Yeah, unfortunately, North America has had a long history of destroying public infrastructure with regards to buses and railway services. General Motors set up dummy corporations and went around underbidding public services and then running them into the ground. So we have an establishment base here in North America that is against public assets in that manner. So I think that there is a lot of hope for fixing the ENN, but again, it has to come from lots of political will. I think a test with those buses to see if we can develop a ridership is a really good step in that direction, proving that if people want to ride on the rails, then it would be worth the investment. So that's what I'd like to see happen.